Coming up next, over the last few years, I've shared hundreds upon hundreds of interviews with you. And in celebration of hitting 1 million subs, today, I'm going to share my favorite interview of all time. One that I watch every single month. You'll find out why coming up next. It's my most personal episode of Professor of Rock. Coming up. Hey, music junkies. Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. If you remember eating Atomic Fireball candies back in the day, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now to be a part of our community dedicated to the timeless music of the rock era, stories straight from the legends. Man, those Atomic Fireballs, they got really hot. I had to spin them out a few times before finishing them. Also, check us out on Patreon. We have more stuff there. It helps to keep it a daily channel. So the channel hit 1 million subs, and I think I've mentioned it before. We're going to put together some special episodes for this occasion. So appreciative to everyone who watches, all your support over the years. We have some great interviews and some great episodes coming up. I've done nearly 700 interviews since I started Professor of Rock. And whenever I bump into someone who watches the channel, it seems like I get the same question time and again. It's, what is my favorite interview? It's actually a really easy answer for me. I've shared hundreds of origin stories that have come out of the interviews that I've done, and I've shared some of my stories over the last several years with you. But today, I'm going to give you my origin story. I'm going to take you back to the 80s, when I grew up, where I grew up. For anyone who has seen even a handful of episodes, you know that my dad was the one who raised me on rock and roll. Well, a few years before he passed away, I actually had the chance to take a camera crew out to the small town in Idaho where I grew up, and I got to interview my dad. I also interviewed my wife, my friend, my grandpa and grandma. My grandpa also passed away a few years ago. Today is a story about how Professor of Rock got his start, and I take you back to Blackfoot, Idaho, where it all started. I also have some artists and bands in this episode as well. I hope you enjoy it. Now, as we get into this episode, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. Make sure to click on our info button right up here or in the description below to get up to 80% off regular retail prices. Well, let's take a trip to the 80s, to my small town in Idaho. Here it is. I guess if comic books are any indication, everybody's interested in the origin story. My name's Adam Reeder, but most people call me the Professor of Rock.
Hi, this is Roger McGuinn.
Watch The Professor.
You better watch The Professor.
Hey, the Red Rocker, Sammy Hagar here.
Hey, this is Vanilla Ice. Make sure you watch
The Professor of Rock,
Pop and Soul.
You are the professor indeed.
The most lavishly handsome professor of rock and roll.
I feel extremely blessed because I've had the opportunity to converse with some of the greatest artists in the history of popular music. I've always been obsessed with rock and roll ever since I can remember. It's like that Don Henley song, there's that same small town in each of us. That's where it started for me. I grew up in a small town in Idaho. But ever since I can remember, my dad and I were always at each other's throats. We couldn't see eye to eye on anything, but the one thing that connected us was music.
When he was younger, we butted heads quite a bit because we didn't see eye to eye on lots of things, but did see eye to eye on music. Adam always had all kinds of interest in all kinds of music. We always were doing work out in the shop, and I had a 8-track player out there. Most of the stuff I had was old from when I was in high school in the 70s, so maybe that's why Adam likes the old music.
So we drive around in his old white truck, and I remember the radio was playing. We'd be listening to the Top 40 Countdown with Casey Kasem. My dad was always telling me the stories behind the songs, like the stuff he grew up with, the Beatles and Creedence Clearwater Revival, Crosby, Stills and Nash, all his favorites. Specifically, songs like Penny Lane or Fortunate Son.
The Creedence would sing that, John Fogerty, and he'd sing about not being a fortunate son and having to go to get drafted and go to war. And I went through that. I picked a lottery number, and so we would discuss what brought that about. Or I was always interested in music when I grew up, so I'd know the background about these old artists, the Beatles, and Adam was always curious about them, so we would always ask questions, and I knew a few stories about him, so I would pass those on to him. He always had a mind full of trivial nonsense sometimes.
So I was sitting here in the English literature classroom where I used to go to school at Snake River High School. I remember sitting in this classroom and I always had my nose in a book. Anything I could get my hands on about rock and roll music, whether I got it at the library or a magazine or whatever it was. And we had a very distinguished gentleman who was a teacher here. And I remember him singling me out in front of the class many times and saying, you know, Mr. Reader, you're never gonna amount to anything. You're the king of useless information. You're never gonna amount to anything with your nose in a book about rock stars or pop music. Funny thing is, I use it every day.
Where do you do? You've done research, boy, I'll tell you.
Really?
Yeah.
I love these
like a
facts.
record, yeah.
You really are the professor.
You've been doing your homework, haven't you? He's nailing down each, iconic story.
You know my career better than I do.
Like everyone else says, this is the coolest interview I've ever done. Like seriously, like the best.
My poets were always like Springsteen and Morrissey and Billy Joel, and I learned more from a 3-minute record than I ever learned in school.
Oh, I've known Adam pretty much all of my life. People would always discourage him and always tell him to get serious about life, and stop pursuing all these crazy things, these ideas that he'd had, but he never let that bother him. He never let that deter him.
The thing I admire about Adam is that he thinks of something that he wants to accomplish in life, and he just keeps trying until he gets there. And if he falls down, he gets up and he tries again.
I used to purposely miss the bus because when I rode with my parents, I could hear the radio.
Get Adam to clean the garage or clean the shop. It would take him longer to get his radio and all his music lined up than it would to clean the shop. Sometimes I'd catch Adam with the music full blast and playing a broom or something as a guitar. And
so this is a field behind my house. I used to move pipe, and I got paid $3 a line. I would have to move 3 lines of these, $3 a line. That would earn enough for me to buy a tape, a cassette, or a CD. That's why music was so valuable to me and my friends growing up, because you had to work hard to get that. It wasn't like Spotify where you just went on and streamed it or got it for free or watched it on YouTube. Because we worked so hard to get that cassette or that CD, we would savor it.
What are you doing? It took him 376 lawnmower jobs to pay for that. It's his most favorite thing in the world.
Now it's his most flattest thing in the world. Let's go!
And that's how I felt. I would say, man, I moved, 99 sprinkler pipe for that just to earn that one cassette. So it'd take me like 3 times as long as a normal farm kid to move the pipe because I always had to be listening to my tunes. It's a lot easier to be motivated to move pipe when you're listening to Born to Run or Eye of the Tiger or Don't Stop Believin'.
then he would be late for school and I'd have to end up finishing the pipe and met a skunk halfway and tried to turn around and fell in the canal. I blamed that on Adam. We probably had a fight when he came home after that. The important thing for him was having the music. He always had a great interest in anything trivial.
He's also great with baseball stats, Oscars, who won the Oscars in what year.
Really got this stuff down, huh?
You're invited to my home anytime.
You know more about me statistically than I do. This is great.
I had a feeling you were going to be real good at this.
How do you remember all this stuff in your head? Have you heard every single piece of music ever made?
Adam definitely knows every song ever written. He definitely knows every lyric to every song ever written.
I remember I had a bunch of songbooks, and they're mostly all country. You seen them songbooks, and you just fell in love with them books. And I think that some of them come up missing. And I really think that Adam is the one that got them.
So I was a little kid, probably about 8 or 9, up to 10 years old. I used to ride my BMX bike down to this store. This used to be a market, and now it's, now it's a post office, which is really sad because it's called Merrill's Market, and it was a place where I used to come buy comic books and Garbage Pail Kids, and they had cassettes here, and they were under a lock and key, so that made them even more mysterious, like, oh, what's that thing, And I remember in my interview with Ann Wilson of Heart, I brought this up. I said, well, Bad Animals, I remember riding my bicycle. I was 11 years old, I lived in Blackfoot, Idaho, a little small town, and they had this market, and they would sell cassette tapes there. I remember riding my bicycle down there, and I remember buying Bad Animals the day it came out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Adam and I used to watch a lot of videos together. You know, I can remember the West End Girls, Pet Shop Boys. I remember watching Michael Jackson's Thriller probably 400 times. We would just rewind it and watch it over and over and over again.
Oh yeah.
I even think you had I think you had the coat and everything.
Yeah.
For a while, I think you wore around the one glove. You know, in our spare time when we weren't at school or weren't, you know, doing something else, we were hunting down records. You know, and around here where we grew up in Idaho, there wasn't a lot of access to good music, especially the music like that we liked. Started with, you know, listening to Depeche Mode and the Smiths. And I don't think I ever would have liked the Smiths had it not been for Adam. It reminds me being in Adam's bedroom and him saying, hey, did you know that, what was it? There was a Depeche Mode song, and you had convinced me that Depeche Mode had ripped off the music from Super Mario Brothers. And so forever, I'm trying to like slow down this song, and I think it was Everything Counts.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to slow down this song, and I'm like, I don't see it.
Yeah, looking back on that now, the whole Depeche Mode, Super Mario Brothers thing, I was probably wrong.
When I met Adam, probably our first conversation was about music. It's what connected us. It's definitely why he asked me out. We ended up talking for 3 hours about the Beatles and Billy Joel, my favorite James Taylor, his favorite Bruce Springsteen, who's better, why. He loves to rank, what's your top 5?
You know, growing up, I didn't know it was cool. I remember buying this Rolling Stone magazine. It was the top 100 albums of the 80s, looking through it and just being shocked. I was like, you know, where's Billy Joel? Where's Journey? Where's Toto? I liked everything. You know, my dad kind of laughed at me because he's like, oh, the critics don't consider those guys to be cool. I didn't understand it.
Adam definitely doesn't believe in guilty pleasures. He would give the same respect to Toto that he would to The Clash. A critic favorite, that doesn't influence Adam's judgment in music. He respects artistic integrity.
People ask me all the time, how did you find Adam? How did you discover him? Well, I met Adam in my conference room as I was meeting with a bunch of people. I was going to create a local music show like I had done in San Diego. There was just something about Adam that I found incredibly appealing. And as I got to know him and listened to him, I realized he was like a savant of rock and roll music. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of rock and roll, but he was able to translate it in a pure and passionate way. And his very first interview was with Kenny Loggins.
I just want to mention that I have been doing interviews practically my whole life. This guy's going to be around for a long time, so watch this. He's got what the classic guys have.
Oh, thank you so much. He pulls me aside after the interview and he says, hey, you really got a gift for this. You need to really go after it. And he opened so many doors for me.
There's something about Adam that when he interviews these really amazing superstars, there's such a sincerity in him, such a passion, such a pureness, and authenticity is actually probably the best word, that they can't stop themselves. They just start telling him everything because they start to realize that, like Melissa Etheridge once said, Adam, you know more about me than I know about me. And so that started happening. The Beach Boys said, you're like the professor. And I said, that's what we're going to call you, Adam. You're going to be the professor of rock. There is nobody like Adam Reeder when it comes to interviewing rock and roll stars about the subject that they love and he loves, which is rock and roll music. And when that starts happening, the magic starts, they start talking to him. And you know what's crazy to me is so many of these people have said, Adam, can you write my books? Can you write the autobiography? Can you do my introduction?
I should have talked about that in my book. I guess you should have interviewed me for my book, because that's really what happened right there.
I tell you what,
such a
I love what
guy.
you wrote for me, and
That's
that plaque
so
that you gave
beautiful.
me. I want that to be the forward in my book. I would love to hire you to come in and add a bit of more of myself in it.
I consider you among the 3 best interviewers out there.
He's about the fans. He is creating programming that he would want to watch as a fan. So I think that's what will connect a lot of people to this channel. Adam is the king of nostalgia. The music connects him to a memory every time.
Who's your favorite? You always tell me your favorite artist of all time.
Probably Paul McCartney.
Yep.
We got to go to the concert. You took me.
Yep. And that was a cool experience.
That was one of the best experiences of my life.
Remember to let her into your heart, then you can start to make it better. Hey,
Music is the great connector. Like I said, when my dad and I were growing up and we were, clashing all the time, I've sat down with his heroes who have in turn become my heroes. I get to hear the stories behind those songs that he had told me about, capturing them the way that we are, and curating them. I can share them with my kids now, and they can share them with their kids and every generation thereafter. I just think that's important. In this divisive nation or divisive world that we live in right now, what's going to unite us? What's going to bring us together? Music. Thanks so much for watching. What do you think of Blackfoot, Idaho, and my experiences growing up in the 80s? What are your experiences growing up where you live, either in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s? Share your memories below. Let's have a great nostalgia session. Thank you again so much for your support and helping us get to 1 million subscribers. That's what this community is all about, is sharing this music together. Until next time, 3 chords.